This Moment by Dwayne Fisher, Chapter 1, The Sky is on Fire. I want to confess, I am a people watcher. I think I have spent my life studying people because I was raised as an only child. I had to be a people watcher because I needed agency and access to figure out what was going on in my community. I have half siblings from my father's other marriages, but most of my childhood was spent alone, which made me curious about the composition of other people's lives and families. As a preacher, studying people has helped me to communicate the gospel in ways that are efficient and so far effective. In my people studies, I have known at least two African American people who traveled outside the United States for multiple weeks to other English-speaking countries where the dialect and accent were different. When they returned home, they began communicating with their family, social networks, and communities in the accent that they had been exposed to in those foreign countries. They did not perpetrate it for a day or a week, but years. We have all met some version of this person. If it is not perpetrating an accent, it's something. This person is a symbol, a placeholder for a person I have met many times over during my lifetime. Deep down, this person feels a need to be exceptional, so much so that in a room filled with people who say the sky is blue and the sun is shining, this person, for no other reason than to elevate themselves and present themselves as exceptional or different, is willing to tell everyone that the sky is on fire. I was giving the same introduction to this sky is on fire speech a couple of years ago to a conference, and one of the men in the room raised his hand and said, "I think that's me. I am that guy in the room who thinks the sky is on fire when everyone else is saying the sun is shining." The room went cold and quiet. He went on to tell those in attendance that he simply struggles to reach consensus with others. My assessment of this brother was that he had his own ideas and wanted others in the group to be curious and to respect them. If I had to guess, I think a person like this seeks to be exceptional because in the deepest recesses of their mind, they are skewed by some self-deception. Unfortunately, a person skewed in this way cannot resist putting themselves out there because they hold out hope of capitalizing on something that will elevate or distinguish them. They hope to say something in a gathering that might be perceived as brilliant by those in the room. Falsely, this person believes they will be perceived differently by their peers, possibly to their detriment thereafter. I believe the brother in the group I was speaking to had hoped to reinvent himself and be perceived differently by his peers. But in reality, this brother was loved and respected for who he was rather than the character he wanted to project and perpetrate. I have encountered the strivings of exception-seeking persons over and over again in different organizations, cities, reunions, family events such as weddings and graduations, and, of course, the church. Sometimes it's a man deliberating in jury duty after a trial who says not guilty after he sees the accused smile into the home security camera, then points at it with his middle finger, then walks out of the door with items that don't belong to him. Or the woman who takes the officious position that pink is no less masculine a color to paint a boy's room than blue. Without exception, these people show up everywhere and hold out their exception as a badge of honor. At some point in our lives, we have all misread the room. We have all sought out some exception. We have even withstood the consensus that said the sun was shining over blue skies. There have been moments in our lives when we lacked confidence and contentment in our own uniqueness, so we plagiarized a trait, a quality, a tone, a voice, a mannerism, a story, a thought, or a quote. We have all yearned for something that did not belong to us. The backstory told in the scriptures that introduced the Satan paints a picture of a heavenly being who wanted to be exceptional and so magnificently distinguished from the consensus of angels that he would equate himself to the Creator Yahweh. The role God had created for him complemented the glory of God, but something that radiated in God's glory caused him to want some of that glory for himself. The role of angel no longer nourished his desire to give God praise, so he concocted a plan, and there was a war in heaven which resulted in the Satan's eviction, along with 1/3 of all the angels who chose to align with him. Today, we call this collective of former heavenly beings fallen angels. The heavenly angel Michael, who led the battle against the Satan, remained loyal to his God and his role. Michael and the 2/3 majority of the angelic host who remained loyal had the agency to break from their roles at some point, but they chose to remain aligned with the will of God. These remaining hosting angels found no need to seek an exception for themselves, but continued to flourish in the assignment of roles at creation, in submission to the rule of God. However, at dispute, and ultimately the case and cause for this book, is the discontented Satan, who managed to deceive himself by abandoning his role. In this moment, we are living in a world of discontented people who have systematically found ways to dismantle their roles by making exceptions to the order and operation of those roles. People will abandon the roles of mother, father, husband, wife, or whatever in search of personal fulfillment that showcases all their gifts, talents, and abilities. Dismantling the roles God has given us to thrive and excel in is a type of self-deception. In this book, we aim to discuss self-deception in unconventional ways and shed light on some truths in plain sight, uncovering truths from the accumulated lies we might have told ourselves and believed over a lifetime. Secondly, the book presents cases of external deception out in the world and how they exacerbate our own self-deceptions. Let's start with the self-deception of the Satan, who wanted an eternal home that conformed to his dreams, desires, thoughts, hopes, goals, ambitions, aspirations, and vision board items. That's hyperbole in my sense of humor. God loved the Satan, but the love of God was not enough. The Satan forced unmet needs into the paradise of God that staggered the understanding of the other angels and caused them to be engulfed in a desire for something other than the love, favor, and will of God. The Satan wanted a new construct that would remodel the eternal home and redefine his relationship with God. His imagination sought an exceptional position for himself, so he recruited other angels to imagine and explore themselves, to think outside the box of the eternal home. We construed the preceding actions of the other angels because, according to the Bible, they rebelled. Understandingly, from God's perspective, the Satan and his playbook were allowed to fall to the earth. But what is strikingly curious is how that playbook shows up in both democratic and autocratic societies. In democratic societies, we see it in a form of seemingly innocuous egalitarianism that strangles any reasonable complementarian argument suggesting that we cannot all be equal. Inside of the Satan's playbook is an equity argument found in Isaiah chapter 14, verse 14, where he states, "I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will be like the Most High." Embedded in the subtext of the Satan's word is the idea that God cannot be God alone. The playing field has to be leveled. Opportunities need to be extended, and then I will be like the Most High. While I am pro-diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI, where possible, I am also realistic. We should not force high schools to reserve roster spots for young men under 4 feet tall on varsity basketball teams. Of course, I am being facetious, but sometimes the energy and effort to be inclusive at every turn is counterproductive. The egalitarian systems of the world should not be the standard bearers over theocratic systems. Church communities should not model themselves on governments and their policies, practices, and procedures. While it is true that many of the ideals embodied in the U.S. Constitution were adapted from the Bible, they come nowhere near being a true replica of a theocracy. We absolutely know what is in God's mind regarding a world guided by egalitarian principles, because He has promised us a replacement in His 1,000-year reign in the theocracy known as the Millennium Kingdom that He will set up after our current dispensation of grace. God is going to appoint roles in that kingdom that He expects us to excel and thrive in. Finally, we can all be certain that the Lord will never permit another rebellion to break out in heaven or among any of His appointed servants. So we should plan on our omniscient God determining the compatibility of souls with His roster for the Millennium Kingdom. Any soul capable of repeating the rebellion the Satan caused in heaven would have to be excluded. The playbook of the Satan has crept into the social fabric of cultures around the world unnoticed, according to Jude chapter 1, verse 4, and has become an anthem of humanists as well as the spiritual community of persons who are not in the habit of consulting God's word before they undertake life, marriage, projects, purchases, careers, and business ventures. These individuals are often well-meaning, but they are also people who have learned to shape and fashion the love and will of God into something that aligns with their dreams, desires, thoughts, hopes, goals, ambitions, aspirations, and vision board items. I have heard vehement arguments from people without Bible chapter and verse, espousing that their pursuits are sanctioned by the Lord, as evidenced by the manifestation of those things they sought after and brought to fruition. Unfortunately, they don't know that it's not always the Lord who materializes and brings things into fruition. Moreover, when you have come to believe in yourself and your own abilities for so long, it's hard to conceive of the teaching and wisdom of Matthew 4, where the Satan offered to materialize things for Jesus. Materialization and manifestation are not validation. If you call plays from the Satan's playbook, he will work overtime to manifest your dreams and desires because he needs to keep you believing in materializing your own final destiny. There is something serpentine subtle about the Satan's playbook that sheds a favorable light on the principles of egalitarianism, which allows it to be elevated above any scrutiny in the African American community. We all know the historic fight for civil rights in this country has left our community with no choice but to confer reverential status on egalitarian principles of equality and fairness. Are we willing to scrutinize our dreams that are made possible by egalitarian principles? If you are clinging to the My Dream playbook over the My Kingdom of God playbook, take a moment to reflect, because we all have been created for one well-defined purpose according to the scriptures. Everyone who is called by my name, whom I have created for my glory. I have formed him. Yes, I have made him. Isaiah chapter 43, verse 7. In the United States, egalitarianism has subtly lulled us into beliefs that supersede the underpinnings of our faith, leading us to impose equality where it doesn't belong. I was watching a YouTube video of a WNBA all-star caliber female basketball player playing one-on-one against an average male high school basketball player. Needless to say, the high schooler trounced the WNBA all-star. Someone thought it was important to set up this one-on-one match because somewhere in the collective zeitgeist of our national culture, we have come to believe that men and women are physically equal. Of course, that's not true, nor does saying it degrade women. There was even some talk recently about when the first female basketball athlete might crack the gender barrier and play in the Men's National Basketball Association. A former NBA all-star caliber player and television commentator addressed the subject on national television. sheepishly saying that it was unlikely that women playing in today's game could match up with the men playing in today's NBA because the men are faster, taller, and more muscularly developed. When he made these comments, he spoke delicately so as not to offend people in their television audience with this truth. He understood that some of the audience placed so much value on women's equality that they were not able to distinguish between the physical abilities of men and women. The egalitarian equality mindset that pits women's physical abilities against men's physical abilities is counterintuitive to the creative order taught in plain sight in the Bible. Husbands are told to give honor to their wives as the weaker vessels in 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 7, which was not a condescending remark, but a compliment. We should not impose new hermeneutics and reinterpret 1 Peter chapter 3 and 7 to make it sound more culturally acceptable. However, given our propensity for self-deception, it would not surprise me if someone said that weaker in the Greek does not mean weaker. Please excuse my facetious hyperbole. At age 16, I painfully caught in my hand the unmistakable swoosh and lash of an electrical extension cord turned beating instrument. It was a summer day in 1977 with the sun shining and the skies blue. On the other end of the lash was my mother swinging it for the last of many times she had beaten me with extension cords. On this day, I had an epiphany after the first lash that I was not going to take any more beatings with this brutish, mark-leaving, torturing cord. I had not planned on resisting. It just happened. I was 10 inches taller than her, wearing a size 12 shoe, sprouting a teenage beard on my chin, itching to get my driver's license, and brimming with testosterone. When she swung the cord the second time, instead of submission, I timed it and grabbed it, putting us in a tug-of-war position. To get a firmer grip, she looped the cord around her wrists one more time while demanding that I let it go. Looking back on this, I now realize she had a lot at stake. My mother had been my guiding light in the world. As a single parent, she had braved many obstacles to protect me from becoming a useless man. She championed my causes and helped me to understand racism and how I might have to navigate the world as a lighter complexion African-American male, which is another story. However, when I think back on my childhood, there is one word that stands out to me that my mother is 100% responsible for: initiative. She used to frequently say, "Have some initiative about yourself." I remember asking her what was initiative. She said, "Go do things, get out of the house, go read a book, think for yourself, go be a leader, build something, go learn stuff." Thank God and thank you, Mother, for the best advice I ever received. However, our battle over the extension cord went back and forth. She said, "Let it go," and I said, "No, I am not going to let it go if you're going to hit me." Intermittently, she tried jerking it out of my hands during our standoff when she thought I had relaxed. But I met her each time firmly and physically with a young man's strength. That day, our relationship changed forever when she released the other end of the cord, screaming, "Go to your grandmother's house. You can't live here anymore." It was traumatizing for me to think that I had done the unthinkable in defeating my mother. She told me that I could come back when I was ready to submit to life under her roof. After that day, I went to my grandmother's very restrictive house and never returned home to live with my mother again. I do not take pride in sharing this story and realize that I unintentionally broke her heart that day. However, this experience highlights the physical and emotional qualities that our Creator has bestowed upon men, enabling them to fulfill the roles traditionally associated with the male gender. I believe my epiphany about grabbing the extension cord was brought on by my belief that the beating was truly unjustified. It was about something as trivial as forgetting to feed the dog. That summer, my grambling, college-attending uncle introduced me to the music of Earth, Wind, and Fire, and the experience felt like I had stumbled upon the soundtrack of my life. There was one particular song titled That's the Way of the World that spoke a euphoric vibe directly into my soul, which brought me great comfort after the incident with my mother. My mother was my uncle's older sister, allowing me to confide in him about my concerns regarding her, as he was familiar with our backstory. In those days, my uncle was my role model for what it meant to be a man. He was so handsomely fit that women actually turned to look and stare at this rare, dark-complexioned Shreveport, Louisiana superstar. I loved how he was back then, a young man, quick-witted and filled with amazing stories about his college escapades with women and partying. He was the spark and the reason I wised up in high school and got my grades up so I could attend a four-year university. The way he viewed the world made me reflect on my own life, even allowing me to reevaluate my experiences and learn lessons. For instance, I have seen another version of myself who took that beating at age 16 and spent the remainder of his adult life in tugs of war with women he could not understand, a man willing to submit and abandon his strengths and divine abilities to protect himself in exchange for the affirmation, acceptance, and approval of women. A man so deceived by unprocessed anger and guilt that he believed the best way to interact with women was to be overly nice, let them have their way, and submit to their rivalry for equality versus honoring them for their amazing and divine feminine form as the Creator intended. Women can be strong and influential without sacrificing men, but that's not what tends to happen. Men with unprocessed anger or guilt fall into a cycle. They spend the rest of their lives in a loop of self-deception, repeating the same life patterns, immersed in painful partnerships with women. I have known a number of adult men who watched their mothers be beaten by their fathers while growing up. The unaddressed pain they carried into their adult lives after watching mom take beatings caused them to be overly protective of all women and excessively kind to women. Suspiciously, some of the women these men encountered did not welcome the niceness because it seemed to lack masculinity. Moreover, some women they encountered mistook this kindness for weakness and abused them financially and emotionally. The men accepted the abuse because down deep, they believed women had suffered enough at the hands of men, and because their mothers had suffered, suffering this abuse at the hands of women made it evident to them that they had achieved their goal of not becoming the monsters their fathers had been to their mothers. This type of consolation prize can be classified as self-deception. End of chapter 1.